title says knowledge applications for economic development. In short, it just says, how do we convert intellectual property to wealth? What does it mean to know something, or to know something that has value? You can know things. A lot of people know a lot of stuff, but not many people know something that somebody is willing to pay money for. And what I'm about to share with you is my own experience working through various stages of being a student, a faculty, a consultant, advisors of governments and industry, and self-employed, entrepreneur in my own right, and understanding the whole concept of value chain from concept to wealth. So next slide, please. Well, as an introduction, I will first of all draw your attention to two economic factors that I think we all should have in mind. I mean, we have GDPs and GNPs or whatever, but for me, two key numbers are the unemployment rate and the population rate in the poverty line. Unemployment rate talks about whether or not your citizens are gainfully employed, doing something of value on a day-to-day basis. But the population rate below poverty line indicates the value of that work. Now, based on data that's available to me, which is published on CIA.gov, Nigeria is supposed to enjoy a 4.9% unemployment rate, which sounds good. That means that 95.1% Nigerians are working. But that 95.1% is not enough to remove 70% of the population above poverty line. So something is wrong there. That means that all that work, all that sweat and tears is not producing wealth. And that's really what I'm going to talk about in this lecture. Now, this chart is just a simple graphic to show you a very simple way of understanding knowledge and wealth. See, everything that happens to the process where you convert natural resources to industrial output involves the impartation of knowledge of one sort or the other. The knowledge to know how to dig it from the ground, the knowledge to process it, the knowledge to design and make things out of it, and then the knowledge to find the market for it. Now, it turns out that you don't have to have the natural resources. You can pick any 2 points along that slope. You can import parts, assemble them, and resell them at a higher price. You can look at the global market and see how things are flowing, and insert yourself, between two nodes, and add value. And you're creating wealth. Now, but what is quite clear in our current situation in the country is most of what we do is just pick up natural resources and find the most ready buyer. The whole idea of employing people to add value through knowledge to create industrial output is not yet commonplace. It's somewhere, I'm not going to say it's not there at all, but it is not at a level to fit 70% of our population above poverty line. So, what I'm going to show you, based on what I know, is how other countries, especially the United States, which I'm very familiar with, convert knowledge to wealth. Now, knowledge has 4 components. Okay, you can know things in terms of just having information. You can know why things are the way they are in terms of knowing the science. But it also takes knowing how to make things happen, having some specific expertise of how to design the process, resource that process, implement that process, and derive value from the process. And then finally, you have to have relationships. You have to know who's to your left on the value chain and who's to your right on the value chain, and what relationship makes you relevant to both sides, such that you're gainfully employed in transferring value from one end to the other. Along with those four components are also four corresponding challenges. In order to have information, you have to have access to information. Okay, so the broadband challenge. And if main one is here, they can talk more about what they're doing in the industry about bringing broadband internet to the country. There's access to science in the sense that learning science should not end in school. Learning science should be a lifelong thing. Young people, old people, literate people should have some sense that they can manipulate the environment simply by knowing the science of it. Like, if you drive around in a house, I don't see even things like mechanisms, ways of pumping water from wells, ways of lifting heavy weights with pulleys and stuff like that. We have not even gone very far in propagating that knowledge that's been available for a long time, for day-to-day use. So then there's also access to expertise and access to relationships. Now here's a very interesting graphic that I thought could make a very important point, which has to do with what we mean by development. Okay, if you look at two entities interacting with each other, if you are not developed enough to buy what I'm selling, I could be concerned about your development. I could be interested in how to develop you so you can buy what I'm selling. Okay. At the same time, you yourself could be concerned about developing yourself enough to produce what I want to buy. So I draw a line there, more like a neutral line where, okay, what you're buying and what you're consuming kind of balance each other out. Okay. So on one side of that line, you see a form of development, which means that you're growing in your capacity to consume somebody else's industrial output. And that's a lot of what you see when you rely on aid from the World Bank and many of these multinational aid organizations. At the end of the day, when they lend you $1, that dollar develops a taste for what they make that will make you come back and borrow $5 more so you can buy more of the same. And within a very short period of time, you are very deeply in debt. And you can confirm what I'm saying by surveying all the countries that have depended on the World Bank for their development. They always end up with a trade deficit, which eventually leads to the devaluation of their own currency, and then they become a basket case. On the other hand, if you now focus your development goals on developing your capacity to produce what other people are buying, this will be what you are consuming from them, then you see a different approach to development. That's why I drew this chart. So we see that one can be very focused on a development goal that increases your ability to produce and export and reduces what you consume from foreign producers. Now, the other interesting thing is that this one I said earlier that somebody can give you $1, make you owe them $5 eventually. You can also flip that. I mean, the food, we talked about food earlier, about the food in a country. In some countries, that is like organic food that is very expensive, which could potentially be a market for us to sell to them. Could we not also cultivate their taste for our food by offering them aid? Okay, you go to the neighborhoods where they have impoverished people, you introduce your line of yams or vegetables or what have you, and eventually they cultivate a taste for what you sell, and then you have a market. I'm just saying, we're not doing that. There was a big disaster in the Philippines, and I didn't hear of any African country shipping any aid to them. Or if you come to even Washington D.C., there are neighborhoods that people are very malnourished. I don't hear of any African country coming to say, okay, we're serving people in all these neighborhoods, let's send them. And as a matter of fact, you can actually get somebody else to collaborate with you to ship those things. Because those people also would like to think that they are giving aid. So it's okay, all my bananas that will afford to waste here, I'll donate it to some organization there who will pay for the shipment of the bananas, and hopefully by the time they finish eating that banana, they like it, they want to order some more. then you start charging them the correct price. I'm just saying, that's this context, but they do it to us. You know, they send you powdered milk, this product, that product, you know, with whatever it is that makes you develop a strong taste for it, where nothing else will satisfy your appetite for what comes from them. So, now, I look at this from a systems approach in the sense that I want to see how the whole thing fits together. How does it work? And what keeps it working? And what stops it from working if it's not working? Okay. Now, you see all the entities that you see here interact with each other on a value exchange basis. Okay. People will be extremely reluctant to pay school fees if the degrees they are getting does not empower them to earn money or to become entrepreneurs. So, if you look at the population of people and the goal is to make that population more productive in terms of creating wealth, then you have to look at what you're impacting on them in terms of knowledge applications. I mean, who's producing that knowledge? Okay, and how is that entity being sustained? You know, and of course, the government is there basically as a policy creator that sets the context for it. The government can invest in particular fields based on its own policy goals. The same thing with industry. Industry can make investments in terms of engaging students to do research that will create products that will make them able to go to the market. Now, these two arrows is what I want to focus on. Okay. Now, I call it other because I'm trying to stay non-political, but that's basically just what you call your allocations from wherever it is that you wait for allocations to happen. My point is that if this engine is really working, you don't need anybody to allocate anything. You can actually have an economy that sustains itself based on the value produced by the intellectual property of your population. And that depends on the quality of knowledge that you create in your knowledge centers. And when I say knowledge centers, I'm not particularly talking about the type of institution. You know, it could be a university, it doesn't have to be. It could be a polytechnic, it doesn't have to be. A knowledge center is basically that. And that's one of the reasons why I impress on people from the OFLBR, the Offer Center, the Fish Farming Education and Resource Center to give us a presentation that we give tomorrow, which shows you a knowledge center that is not a university, not even a school, not even a polytechnic, but people go there to acquire applied knowledge that empowers them to either be entrepreneurs or skilled workers. And once we understand that it doesn't take too much more than that to change the whole picture of how we run our society, then we can focus on how to create more of those opportunities for people to have a place where they can go to acquire knowledge that will empower them to be either entrepreneurs or skilled workers that can feed industry and allow those industries to become competitive in the global market. Now, the systems model is also interesting. Can you go back for a second? Now, if you cut those arrows anywhere, you can actually measure what is flowing through them. It doesn't have to happen in the dark. It doesn't have to be guesswork. You know, you can actually construct agencies or organizations to actually allow you to see how this is allowing your society to progress from one level to the next. Next time. Okay, now this is how it happens in the United States, and I believe in many other countries too. You have to the left, you know, you have the set of coded budgets for agencies. Okay, these are considered to be S&T investment. Take of it, not in terms of giving money to anyone, but offering money to induce a particular activity that will return a value. And the leftmost is your basic research, which many of our professors are familiar with. That is where you're confirming your understanding of the laws of nature. You're not really applying anything, you're not really addressing anybody's particular need. You're just saying that I know the physics or the chemistry or the biology of this process, and I can predict what will happen if I put together a series of experiments or what have you. So when people are applying for money to do basic research, they don't have to promise anything. All they have to do is demonstrate the fact that they're qualified to do basic research and they have a notion of what they want to look at, and that will become evident when you look at the person you see who has worked with this professor here or graduated from that college. She must know. So a lot of basic research grants are given based on the fact that you have a reputation as a good researcher and you have good students. But as you move to the right, things start getting practical. When you go to 6.2, now you're already saying that I'm proving the science. I know that if I bounce this ball, it will pop up so high. Now I want to show you that I can design a device which will use that principle to allow you to go and accomplish something else. Now, over there, a lot of the focus is on the military and space travel and all that kind of stuff. But this can work regardless of what your policy objectives are. Whether you're dealing with poverty in rural areas or dealing with food security, it's a question of understanding what are the basic sciences involved in it and how are they applied. And then at any given point in time, all of these activities from 6.1 to 6.7, they are going on in one agency or the other. Okay. I'm going to expand on this. This is just an expansion on the same thing. Now, what I want to first of all note is the width of each of those segments. When I made up this slide, it was supposed to be proportional to the size of the budget. So you can see that basic research is a very small slice, but as you start getting to the application end, it gets bigger. So you can actually get a sense of how much money is being invested in different phases of technology development. And I drew a flow chart, like I said earlier, you will get a copy of all of this, those that submit an email, so you can study this in detail. I'm not going to try to walk through this, every step of the way, but you can see all of the activities that go on in creating new technologies, new products, new value. All the machines that you import from all these countries, they pop out of this process at some level or the other. Initially, they start out as a specific requirement of the government. China is trying to do this. We need an airplane that can fly faster, whatever. So that becomes an objective for a whole host of agencies that will now fund knowledgeable people who can demonstrate their capabilities in all those areas. Now, again, going back to that 6.1 through 6.7, you see, the middle part is where 1 or 2 man research groups become 10 or 20 million companies. After they've discovered the science, they've proven it, they've designed some application, it works. Now they have customers calling them from all over the world. All of a sudden, you have demand for employees, so you can see the S-curve for the jobs right there. So, in other words, I look at the categories of entities that tend to populate that end. The left end tends to be populated by universities, where you're doing a lot of basic research and a little bit of applied research. The far end on the right are established industries, when products and services have been matured into markets, and you have specific branded products that people are selling. But in between is what is generally considered to be innovation companies. Companies that are emerging, who have just entered the market, companies that go on initial public offerings where people, their shares all of a sudden become millionaires overnight because they have a value in the marketplace. So all of this is to just give you a top level view of how knowledge gets converted to wealth. And I'm saying I'm using the case of the US because that's what I know personally. I've been functioning there for nearly 40 years. But I'm sure that if you go to Japan, or Korea, or China, or India, or any part of Europe, you will find something not too different. You find it's a general scenario that you find. Now, so if you were to now scale the map of the world based on how much of these science and technology investments are being made by different countries, this is what the map will look like. Now, of course, these are two snapshots. Okay, this was done. One was done in 1996, another one in 2006. This is nothing typical here. There's nothing here that you cannot find online. You know, I in fact give you references. This information is published every year by Patel based on information that they collect from the IMF and from CIA and all that. But as you can see, the map of the world is distorted based on how much is being invested in science and technology. Did anybody see where Africa is in that one? It's there, but it's there. So this struck me the first time I saw it, and I thought I should share it with you because it tells 1,000 stories. Okay. Now, of course, I also extracted specific numbers from all this data. What I want you to notice here is that if you take three snapshots, 2010, 2011, 2012, and I don't know how well you can see this, but if you focus on the R&D, this blue column, the R&D as a percentage of GDP, you see how consistent it is from year to year for each country. I mean, it's not the same for everybody, but for a given country, it is consistent. You ever wonder why? It is coded into the law. It is coded how much needs to be invested in science and technology, research and development. So the government can change, you can vote one out of power, put the other one in. The law is still there. And they have to invest so much in science and technology. And this has been going on for since more or less the Industrial Revolution in many of these countries. And I doubt very much whether or not we have any similar codes here that compels our government to invest a known finite percentage of the gross domestic product on science and technology, research and development. Okay, next. No, before you go, this is the top 20, okay. That's what we showed you, next 20. And, no, go back again. Okay, South Africa is number 28. We know why. You know, unfortunately, we just lost Nelson Mandela before he came along. That was a quasi-European country. So I'm not sure that we can totally take credit for that. Next slide. Okay, now I'm taking you back now to the chart that I showed you earlier. And I wanted to let you see physically where Professor Fabiro's reference to the triple helix, where he placed him. See, knowledge centers, policy centers, government, and enterprise centers. That's like the engine that drives the whole process. So I'm very glad that he went before me because he has done most of the hard work to let you see how it actually works and give you examples of it. I'm just here to more or less show you the physics of it. Okay, why it's an engine that must be designed. Okay. Now I have to confess one thing. When I came for my first visit under this arrangement with AWENI last September, I didn't know what to expect because I'd been gone from the country for a few decades before that. And on the surface of it, one would expect that I would come in here with all these bright ideas and concepts from America, whatever. But what I found was that all the knowledge is already here. I mean, this audience alone, you have people who are tops in any of the fields that you want to mention. Globally, not just locally. I mean, I've been to many of their labs, I know many of the publications, you know, it's like you're walking into a store full of all the spare parts you need but it's not assembled. So I'm not here to say, oh, there's something that I know from America that nobody knows here. That is not it. What I don't see is that connectivity. So that would make it quite obvious why my first effort was applied to this gathering. And this is, I don't want us to see this as just another conference because people have done many conferences before this. I want us to see this as the launching of action plans of what are we going to do with all this information and all this knowledge and all this awareness. And of course, somebody mentioned, I think over lunch or somewhere, how we have suffered over the years from the lack of collaboration among our knowledge leaders. We have not actually seen ourselves as components of the bigger engine. We've all been preoccupied with trying to impress everybody else how smart we are individually. And that has gotten us nowhere. So if you get nothing from me, throughout this whole exercise, is for all of us to see where we fit into each other in terms of facts. To look at ourselves in terms of where we are on the value chain from one node to the next. And hook up and do what we have to do. Next. Oh, you've seen this, this is the triple helix. Of course, notice I don't call it university, government, and industry. I use the actual action term, knowledge, enterprise, and policy. Okay? I mean, these are and the reason, in case you're wondering why people are thinking of it as a helix, they're thinking of it because it's more like an extension of the double helix of the human genome system. Okay, where the genes are woven into every cell. That means that this whole concept of knowledge, enterprise, and policy needs to be woven into every fabric of our society at every level, just like a gene. That is why we're using the helix, paradigm to call it the triple helix. So I know, but I was sitting there and the professor was talking about helix. I'm saying, I wonder if people really appreciate what it means. And I was waiting to show this. I didn't want to interrupt him. I said, okay, I have a slide to process that. How many more? 3 minutes? Alright, next slide. Okay, now just like he gave the example of the cluster in the credit. I dug up this from California, one country. I thought this is closer to home because it's agricultural in nature. It talks about growers of wine, grapes. It talks about the processing of it, but it also talks about entire industries that surround that process. People who make the bottles, the corks, and then you have universities where they have research centers focused on wine production. You have policy agencies created just to drive the whole thing. This is what we're talking about. Creating appropriate clusters for different industries based on what we know, based on what we have, and based on the markets available to us. I came back to this just to also show you that there's innovation going on with regards to knowledge centers. It's not just about university degrees anymore. I mean, right now, you have access to broadband internet. You can get courses from MIT free of charge. You can get courses from OAU. We have the director for distance learning here. You have access to the internet. You can learn everything you need to learn. The comfort of your own, video room. Now, here is this. I'm not going to pretend that I can go through this completely here. But what I'm trying to do here is to show what clusters actually achieve. In the sense that, remember the professor talked about the computer people going and getting all the parts for what he needs without you really having to pay cash. That is exactly what you have here. What if a farmer can access machinery and business management and R&D without having to preach a word about paying for it. That opens up all kinds of possibilities. You can even talk of trying to rent an airplane to fight pests from the air, because they're all part of some huge organization called an innovation cluster. And everything boils down to the ability to create value that fits the market, that returns in some profit to the investors. And we have a session, I believe, either tomorrow or the day after, where you actually hear from financiers themselves, who will break down what it's all about. Next time. So these are the challenges. Okay, how do we re-engineer our governance? Okay, to foster knowledge-based economic activities. How do we transform our greatest economic assets into wealth? Believe it or not, every one of those children that you see out there trying to sell pure water has a functioning brain, which is an engine for creating wealth. Wealth that's more valuable than even money and all wealth. Okay, because human ingenuity has no limit. If you wake up one day, you get a bright idea, and that idea is nurtured, and you can go forward and produce something out of it, you're somebody else. And then we have to have some investment in society now. And these are challenging because I want us to collectively address this over the next few days or even into the future, and come up with an approach or a framework or something that we both believe, we all believe can lead us to where we want to go. Next slide. Conclusions. Now, this is on purpose. The conclusion level is in fine print because I don't want to say those yet until after we've had a chance to interact with each other. If I go online and change the color of the letters, you see what it is. But if I make it known now, I'll be like telling you what I think should happen. I don't want to do that, not just yet. I do have my own thoughts, but right now I'm submitting to the collective intelligence that we brought together. And that concludes my talk. Thank you.